I'm Eliza, 29 years old, and I've always been second best to my sister Katherine in my mother's eyes. When Katherine's wedding day finally arrived, I discovered my assigned table was tucked away near the coat racks. When I confronted my mother, she smiled tightly and said, "I thought it was thoughtful. You've always been uncomfortable in crowds." That moment crystallized years of subtle rejection and favoritism that had shaped our family. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you'll understand what happened next. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up in suburban Boston, the signs of my mother's favoritism were subtle at first. Our brick colonial house on Maple Street looked picture perfect from the outside, but inside, the walls told a different story. The living room walls showcased Katherine's dance recital photos and academic certificates in ornate frames, while my art competition awards gathered dust in a drawer. I was 4 years younger than Katherine, but the age gap never explained the disparity in attention. My father, Robert, tried his best to balance the scales. He'd take me for ice cream after my mother missed my school play to attend Katherine's debate competition. "Your mom just gets caught up sometimes," he'd explain, wiping vanilla ice cream from my chin. "She loves you both the same." But his eyes never quite met mine when he said it. When Katherine needed a new winter coat, she got a shopping trip and lunch date with Mom. When I needed one, I inherited Katherine's old coat with the frayed cuffs. "It's practically brand new," Mom would insist, though we both knew it wasn't true. Besides, the blue brings out your eyes better than it ever did hers. Family vacations were planned around Katherine's interests. If Katherine wanted to see historical sites, we toured museums. If she wanted the beach, we packed sunscreen. The summer I begged to visit the national parks to practice my photography. Mom scheduled our trip to New York instead, because Katherine wanted to see Broadway shows. Despite the favoritism, I excelled academically. My report cards boasted straight A's, and my art teachers urged my parents to enroll me in advanced classes. "Eliza has real talent," my high school art teacher told my mother during a parent-teacher conference. Mom nodded politely before asking when we could wrap up because Katherine had a college interview that afternoon. Katherine wasn't cruel about the favoritism. She simply didn't notice. To her credit, she always included me in her accomplishments. When she was named valedictorian, she thanked me in her speech for helping her study. When she got into Yale, she bought me a sweatshirt too. But she never noticed how Mom's eyes sparkled when talking about her achievements, then glazed over when discussing mine. My bedroom became my sanctuary. I'd spend hours sketching, painting, and eventually designing on my computer. Art became my voice when words failed me. Each brushstroke and digital creation affirmed that I existed, that I mattered, even if my mother couldn't see it. College became my escape. I chose Northwestern, far enough from Boston that weekend visits home weren't expected. In Chicago, I flourished. No one knew me as Katherine's little sister. I was just Eliza, the talented graphic design student who stayed late in the studio and produced work that professors praised. I made friends who valued me for myself, not in comparison to anyone else. After graduation, I landed a job at a respected design agency in Chicago. My portfolio grew, featuring campaigns for national brands. I created a life that was entirely my own, building a community of friends who became my chosen family. My apartment reflected my personality, bright, creative, and warm, everything I'd wanted my childhood home to be. Contact with my family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional birthday text. Dad would call sometimes, his voice carrying a weight of things unsaid. Katherine would reach out when she had big news to share, like her law school graduation or her first major case win. Mom's communications were perfunctory, usually relayed through Dad or Katherine. Then came the call that upended my carefully constructed independence. Katherine was engaged to James, a fellow attorney she'd met at her firm. She wanted me as a bridesmaid. "It wouldn't be right without you there, Eliza," she said, her voice warm with genuine affection. I agreed, despite the anxiety that immediately knotted my stomach. Returning to the family orbit meant facing the patterns I'd escaped. But Katherine had always been kind, and I loved her despite everything. Maybe, I thought, things would be different now that we were adults. Maybe Mom had mellowed. Maybe I had grown strong enough to withstand the subtle cuts and dismissals. I was wrong on all counts. Katherine's engagement to James was announced with a professional photoshoot and dinner at the country club where our parents were members. James came from a family similar to ours. Upper middle class, traditional with expectations of excellence. He was tall, conventionally handsome, and successful as a corporate attorney. They made sense together, both ambitious and polished. My phone rang 3 days after the engagement news broke on social media. "Eliza, we need to discuss the wedding," my mother said without preamble. "No hello, no how are you, just straight to business. Katherine wants you as a bridesmaid, and we need to schedule fittings." "Hello to you too, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "How have you been the past 6 months?" She paused as if calculating the minimum response required. "Fine, busy with the hospital board. Now about these fittings." I agreed to fly back to Boston the following month for the first round of wedding preparations. Despite my misgivings, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this shared experience would bridge the gap between my mother and me. Perhaps being part of Katherine's special day would finally make me visible. The bridesmaid dress fitting was held at an upscale boutique in Back Bay. Katherine had chosen a soft sage green that complemented everyone's coloring. A thoughtful choice that was purely Katherine. As I stood on the platform while the seamstress pinned the dress, my mother circled like a hawk. "You've gained weight since Christmas," she observed, loud enough for the other bridesmaids to hear. "We'll need to take special care around the waist." I felt my cheeks burn as Madison and Taylor, Katherine's college friends, exchanged glances. "The dress fits perfectly," the seamstress countered. "Your daughter has a lovely figure." Mom pursed her lips. "Well, we have 3 months. Perhaps a stricter diet would help." She then turned to Katherine, her voice transforming into honey. "You look absolutely radiant, darling. We should schedule another fitting for your dress next week." Later, as Katherine was occupied with her own fitting, Mom pulled me aside. "We'll need to cover that tattoo for the photos," she said, eyeing the small constellation on my wrist that I'd gotten to mark my first major design award. "It's tacky." "It's part of who I am, Mom," I replied. "Well, on Katherine's day, you need to be part of the aesthetic she wants. We can use makeup to cover it." Katherine's bachelorette weekend was held at a vineyard in the Berkshires. The other bridesmaids, Madison, Taylor, Bethany, and Courtney, had all been friends with Katherine since college. I was the only family member in the bridal party, and the odd one out in every way. While they reminisced about sorority pranks and law school study groups, I sipped my wine in silence. Mom had appointed herself unofficial chaperone. Despite Katherine's protests that at 33, she hardly needed supervision. Throughout the weekend, Mom texted and called Katherine constantly, checking if she needed anything, if the accommodations were satisfactory, if the activities were enjoyable. Not once did she check on me. "Your mom is really involved," observed Jessica, James's sister and the only other bridesmaid I didn't know previously. She had joined us for dinner on the second night of the weekend. "That's one way to put it," I replied with a wry smile. Jessica tilted her head. "You and your sister seem really different." "We are." She got all the family ambition. I got all the family creativity. "And who got your mom's attention?" Jessica asked perceptively. I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. Jessica nodded as if my silence confirmed her suspicion. For the rest of the weekend, she made a point of including me in conversations, drawing out stories about my work in Chicago, making me feel less alone. The pre-wedding dinner 2 nights before the ceremony was held at my parents' country club. As I helped arrange place cards on the welcome table, I overheard my mother speaking to the event coordinator. "Table 8 needs to be moved further back, near the coat room," she was saying. "It's for some colleagues and my younger daughter. It's a perfect spot for her. She won't have to socialize too much." I froze, place card in hand. Table 8. My assigned table. Later that evening, I approached her as she adjusted flower arrangements. "Mom, I heard you talking about seating me at table 8 by the coat room. Is that true?" She didn't even look up from the roses she was rearranging. "It makes the most sense, Eliza. The head table is for immediate family and the wedding party, but we can't all fit. Katherine needs me and your father there, naturally. And I'm not immediate family?" The hurt in my voice was unmistakable. Finally, she glanced at me, her expression impatient. "Don't make this about you. It's Katherine's wedding. You'll be more comfortable away from all the attention anyway. You never did like these sorts of events." I wanted to argue, to point out that she had never bothered to learn what I did or didn't like, Instead, I swallowed my protest. Right. Katherine's wedding. The night before the wedding, despite my hurt feelings, I helped Katherine with last-minute details. We sat in her old bedroom, now converted to a guest room but still bearing traces of her achievements on the walls. Are you nervous? I asked as I assembled welcome bags for out-of-town guests. Katherine smiled, tying ribbons around programs. Not about marrying James. A little about the whole production Mom has turned this into. I nodded, understanding completely. She's always gone all out for your milestones. Too much sometimes, Katherine admitted. I wanted something smaller, but you know Mom. For a moment, I thought she might acknowledge the disparity in our mother's attention, but the moment passed. Katherine yawned and stretched. I should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. I hugged her goodnight. My heart a mixture of love for my sister and the familiar ache of being the afterthought in my mother's careful planning. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect early autumn day that wedding planners dream about. The bridal party gathered in a luxurious suite at the Four Seasons, Boston, where makeup artists and hairstylists had set up stations around the room. Katherine sat in the center like a queen, champagne flute in hand, while bridesmaids orbited around her in varying stages of preparation. I arrived early, having barely slept the night before. My mother was already there, adjusting the display of Katherine's dress and issuing instructions to the hotel staff about room temperature and lighting. Good morning, I said, setting down my bag of emergency supplies, fashion tape, extra hairpins, stain remover, and granola bars in case anyone got hungry. Mom barely glanced my way. You're here. Good. Your dress is hanging in the bathroom. The makeup artist will get to you after she finishes with Madison and Taylor. No good morning in return. No thank you, for the emergency kit I'd thoughtfully prepared. Just instructions and dismissal. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Katherine was radiant, her happiness genuine and infectious. Despite my complicated feelings about the day, I couldn't help but be happy for her. She deserved this joy. When it was finally my turn in the makeup chair, the artist had just begun applying foundation when my mother appeared over her shoulder. Not so heavy on the blush, she instructed. Eliza flushes easily and it looks garish in photos. I think a soft rose would actually complement her skin tone beautifully, the makeup artist suggested. I've known my daughter her whole life, Mom replied firmly. Trust me on this. The makeup artist glanced at me questioningly. I gave a slight nod, surrendering to avoid conflict. Mom continued to hover, critiquing every brushstroke until I barely recognized the pale, subdued face in the mirror. Perfect, Mom declared finally. Much more appropriate. As she walked away, the makeup artist leaned down and whispered, "Bathroom break in 5 minutes. I'll fix this." True to her word, she later transformed the washed-out look into something that actually enhanced my features, working quickly before my mother could return. When the photographer arrived, Mom positioned herself constantly at Katherine's side. Mother of the bride in the star of the day, she announced as the shutter clicked. Photo after photo was taken, Mom zipping Katherine's dress, Mom placing the veil, Mom adjusting Katherine's jewelry. Let's get one with both daughters, the photographer suggested. Oh, we have a tight schedule, Mom deflected. Let's focus on Katherine. We can do family groups later. Jessica caught my eye across the room and raised an eyebrow. I shrugged, trying to convey that this was normal, expected even. Your makeup looks much better than before, Jessica commented when she came to stand beside me as we watched Katherine pose. Secret bathroom makeover, I admitted. The artist took pity on me. Jessica linked her arm through mine. Well, you look stunning. That green is your color. Her kindness nearly undid me. I blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that would ruin the carefully rescued makeup. Dad arrived to collect Katherine for the ceremony, stopping first to give me a quick hug. You look beautiful, Eliza, he said softly. His eyes held an apology I'd seen many times before, regret without action, sympathy without intervention. Thanks, Dad, I replied, straightening his tie. You clean up pretty well yourself. He patted my hand where it rested on his lapel. I'm sorry about this eating, he murmured. I tried to. Robert, we need you for photos with Katherine. My mother's voice cut through our moment of connection. He squeezed my hand once before being pulled away, back into the orbit of the family star. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The historic church was decorated with cascades of white roses and greenery, sunlight streaming through stained glass to cast colorful patterns across the aisle. I walked down that aisle alone, sixth in line of the 7 bridesmaids, clutching my small bouquet and focusing on not tripping. As I took my place at the altar and turned to watch Katherine make her entrance on our father's arm, tears sprang to my eyes. Despite everything, I loved my sister deeply. She looked radiant, and the joy on her face as she locked eyes with James was genuine. For a moment, I forgot about Table 8 and makeup critiques and a lifetime of coming in second. That moment of pure happiness for Katherine carried me through the ceremony. I listened to their personalized vows, handed over the ring when prompted, and genuinely smiled in the recessional photos as we all exited to Mendelssohn's Wedding March. It wasn't until we arrived at the reception venue, the grand ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel, that reality came crashing back. Guests milled about during cocktail hour while the wedding party took final photos on the waterfront. When we finally entered the reception, I went immediately to find my seat, hoping against hope that there had been a change of plans. There hadn't been. Table 8 was exactly where my mother had specified, tucked in a corner near the coat room, far from the head table where my parents, Katherine, James, and his parents were seated. The other occupants of my table were indeed colleagues of my father's from the hospital where he worked as a surgeon, people I barely knew and who looked equally confused about their placement. The Boston Harbor Hotel ballroom had been transformed into a scene from a luxury wedding magazine. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in ivory linens. Centerpieces of white roses, hydrangeas, and delicate greenery rose from silver vases. The place settings featured fine china with silver trim, multiple crystal glasses, and elaborately folded napkins. A string quartet played softly in the background. It was elegant, refined, and exactly my mother's taste. Katherine had likely had minimal input. Table 8 stood in stark contrast to this splendor. While decorated with the same linens and flowers, it was positioned awkwardly beside the entrance to the coat room. Waitstaff constantly brushed past on their way to and from the kitchen. The quartet's music was nearly drowned out by the proximity to the service area. Even the lighting was dimmer, as if the corner had been forgotten by the designer. "You must be Eliza," said an older gentleman as I approached the table. "I'm Dr. Parker. I work with your father in cardiology." "Nice to meet you," I replied automatically, still processing my surroundings. "Bit of an odd placement, isn't it?" he observed, glancing around. "I would have thought family would be up front." I forced a smile. "Excuse me for a moment." My mother was by the head table, directing staff on the placement of the bride and groom's special champagne flutes. She wore a carefully chosen silver blue gown that complemented Katherine's white dress perfectly in photos. Her hair and makeup were flawless. She looked every bit the proud mother of the bride. "Mom," I said, approaching her with measured steps. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" She glanced up, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "What is it, Eliza?" "We're about to start the entrance. Why am I seated by the coat room, with Dad's colleagues who are practically strangers?" She sighed, as if I were a child complaining about an unfair bedtime. "I already explained this. We couldn't fit everyone at the head table. But you seated Jessica with James's parents at table 1. She's just a sibling too. That's different. She's the groom's sister. And I'm the bride's sister." My mother looked at me directly then, her expression a mixture of impatience and something worse, indifference. "I thought it was thoughtful, actually. You wouldn't have to socialize much. You've never been comfortable at fancy events anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not only had she banished me to the furthest table, but she had convinced herself it was for my benefit. Worse, she truly believed I was somehow socially inadequate. When have I ever said I don't like socializing? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, Eliza, don't be dramatic. You were always hiding in your room drawing while Katherine was organizing school events. It's just your nature." I stood there, struggling to form words as decades of misperception crashed down on me. I hadn't been hiding. I'd been seeking refuge from constant comparison. I didn't dislike socializing. I disliked being invisible in social settings dominated by my mother's focus on Katherine. "You don't know me at all," I finally managed. "What did you say?" Her tone sharpened. "Nothing," I replied, the familiar pattern of retreat taking over. "Never mind." As I turned to walk away, Jessica appeared at my elbow. "Everything okay?" she asked. though her expression made it clear she'd overheard enough. Fine, I said automatically. Just a misunderstanding about seating. Jessica glanced toward my mother, who had already turned her attention back to the play settings. Want company at your table? I could join you. The kindness of this near stranger compared to my mother's dismissal made my throat tighten. Thanks, but you should stay with your family. It's your brother's day too. During dinner, I picked at my salmon while trying to maintain polite conversation with my father's colleagues. Dr. Parker and his wife were actually quite pleasant, asking thoughtful questions about my design work in Chicago. But the sting of my mother's words made it difficult to focus. From my isolated position, I watched the head table. My father occasionally glanced my way with a concerned expression, but each time he seemed about to stand up, my mother would engage him in conversation or direct his attention to Katherine. My sister, caught up in the joy of her day, seemed oblivious to my exclusion. At one point, I overheard a guest at a nearby table ask, "Who's the bridesmaid sitting all the way back there?" "That's the sister, I think," another replied. "Wonder why she's not with the family." I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone. In the elegant marble bathroom, I stared at my reflection. The makeup artist's skilled work had held up, but nothing could disguise the hurt in my eyes. "Your mother is something else," said Jessica, pushing open the door and joining me at the sinks. I laughed without humor. "That's one way to put it." "No, seriously. I've been watching her all day. She's completely focused on your sister and making sure everyone knows she's the mother of the bride." Jessica leaned against the counter. "My mom can be a bit much sometimes, but she'd never stick me by the coat check. It's been this way our whole lives," I admitted, finally giving voice to what I usually kept hidden. "Katherine is the star and I'm the afterthought." Jessica squeezed my arm. "For what it's worth, I think that's her loss. You seem pretty awesome to me." I managed a genuine smile. "Thanks. I'm glad James has a cool sister." Katherine lucked out in the in-law department. Returning to the reception, I debated simply leaving. The dinner was over, dancing had begun, and in the darkened ballroom, my absence might not even be noticed. But something kept me rooted there, perhaps the last remnants of hope that this day might somehow end differently than a lifetime of family gatherings. That hope was extinguished when my mother took the microphone for her toast. The room quieted as my mother tapped her champagne glass with a silver spoon. The DJ lowered the music, and spotlights illuminated the head table. Mom stood, resplendent in her designer gown, the perfect picture of maternal pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Today is the culmination of every mother's dream, seeing her perfect daughter marry the perfect man. Perfect daughter. Singular. Not daughters. Katherine has always been exceptional." Mom continued. "From her first steps at 9 months, so early, to graduating top of her class at Yale Law, she has never ceased to amaze us. She was a perfect child who has grown into a perfect woman." As she detailed Katherine's achievements and qualities, I felt myself shrinking in my seat by the coat room. Each glowing description of Katherine's perfection was a tacit reminder of my own failure to measure up. Not once did my mother mention having 2 daughters. Not once did she acknowledge my presence at this family milestone. "And so I invite you all to raise your glasses to Katherine and James," she concluded. "The start of a perfect family. We couldn't be prouder." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Katherine, gracious as always, hugged our mother tightly. Dad clapped along with everyone else, though his eyes scanned the room until they found me in the shadows. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the ballroom seemed to close in, the chatter of guests turning to static in my ears. With as much dignity as I could muster, I stood and walked, not toward the exit as part of me longed to do, but toward the balcony doors. I needed airspace, a moment to rebuild the walls that had just been shattered by my mother's public confirmation of what I'd always known privately. I was invisible in my own family. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped onto the deserted balcony overlooking Boston Harbor. The city lights reflected on the dark water, boats passing silently below. Only when I was sure I was alone did I allow the tears to fall hot tracks down my carefully made-up face. "Hey!" Jessica's voice came softly from behind me. She held 2 glasses of wine, offering one to me. "Thought you might need this." I accepted the glass with a trembling hand. Was it that obvious I was about to lose it? Only to someone who was watching. She joined me at the railing. That toast was a perfect summary of my entire life. I finished for her. Katherine the star. Eliza the afterthought. We stood in silence for a moment, sipping our wine and watching the boats. You know, Jessica finally said, your mother did something similar with the seating arrangements for the rehearsal dinner. She told the coordinator you preferred privacy and wouldn't want to be with the main party. I turned to her, shocked. She what? Jessica nodded. I overheard her. When the coordinator suggested putting all immediate family together, your mom said you were different and preferred to observe from a distance. The revelation that my mother had been actively working to separate me from the family, rather than simply forgetting to include me, hit like a physical blow. It wasn't neglect, it was intentional exclusion. Why would she do that? I whispered, more to myself than to Jessica. Some mothers can't handle having more than one star, Jessica replied. My aunt's like that with my cousins. One's the golden child, one's the scapegoat. Before I could respond, the balcony door opened again. Katherine stood there, still radiant in her wedding gown but with concern etched on her face. Eliza? Are you okay? Dad said you looked upset during Mom's toast. Jessica squeezed my arm. I'll give you two some space, she said, slipping back inside. Katherine joined me at the railing. What's going on? It's my wedding day and my sister is hiding on the balcony crying. Did you notice where I was seated? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. By the coat room, right? Mom said you requested a quieter spot away from the dance floor. The lie struck me like a slap. I never requested anything of the sort. Katherine frowned. But Mom specifically said. Mom specifically seated me as far from the family as possible, then told everyone it was my choice. The words tumbled out now, years of hurt breaking through the dam of silence. Just like she's been doing my entire life. Making me invisible, then claiming it's what I wanted. That's not true. Katherine protested, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Mom loves us both equally. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Katherine. When was the last time she attended any event that mattered to me? When has she ever put my needs above yours? When has she ever introduced me as proudly as she introduces you? She's just... She connects with me differently, Katherine said weakly. No, she connects with you. Period. I'm an afterthought, the daughter she tolerates rather than celebrates. Katherine looked stricken. I never realized. Of course you didn't. Why would you? You were busy shining while I was busy being told not to expect the spotlight. The balcony door opened again, and our father stepped out. He took in the scene, Katherine's distress, my tear-streaked face, and sighed heavily. Your mother is looking for you, Katherine, he said. The photographer wants pictures of the cake cutting. Did you know Mom seated Eliza by the coat room and told everyone it was Eliza's choice? Katherine demanded, surprising me with her directness. Dad's gaze dropped to the floor. I tried to change it, but your mother had already finalized everything with the venue. That's not an answer, I said quietly. Did you know she's been pushing me to the sidelines my entire life? He looked up then, his eyes filled with the guilt of a bystander who had never become an advocate. Yes, he admitted. I've always known, and I've never done enough to stop it. His admission, both devastating and validating, broke something open inside me. All the years of wondering if I was imagining things, if I was being too sensitive, if I was somehow deserving of less love, all of it crystallized into the certainty that I had been right all along. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why does she do it? What did I ever do wrong? Dad shook his head. Nothing. You did nothing wrong, Eliza. Your mother, she sees herself in Katherine. The ambition, the drive for traditional success. You're creative, independent. Different from what she understands. Instead of appreciating that, she's always been threatened by it. That's no excuse, Katherine said firmly, surprising me again. Mom had no right to treat Eliza this way. And I had no right to be blind to it for so long. The three of us stood in silence, the weight of years of family dynamics hanging between us. In the distance, I could hear the DJ announcing that it was time for the cake cutting. Katherine would be expected inside. What do you want to do? Katherine asked me, reaching for my hand. If you want to leave, I understand. But I'd really like you to stay, not for Mom, but for me. And for yourself. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. And saw genuine regret in her eyes. Then I looked at my father, who for the first time seemed ready to do more than offer private consolation. I'll stay, I decided. But I'm done pretending everything is fine. Katherine linked her arm through mine as we re-entered the ballroom. You're sitting with us for the cake cutting, she declared, her tone leaving no room for argument. My father followed closely behind, his posture straighter than it had been all day, determination evident in his stride. As we approached the head table, my mother's eyes widened in alarm. Katherine, everyone's waiting, she said, pointedly ignoring my presence. James is already by the cake. Eliza's joining us, Katherine replied firmly. She should have been with us all night. Mom's smile tightened. Don't be silly. The head table is already arranged perfectly for photos. Then rearrange it, Katherine said. My sister is sitting with her family. A flash of anger crossed my mother's face before she smoothed it away, aware of the guests watching this exchange. This isn't the time for drama, Katherine. The photographer is waiting. The only drama, my father interjected, his voice uncharacteristically firm, is the fact that our daughter has been relegated to the coat check corner on her sister's wedding day. Mom turned to him, clearly shocked by his intervention. Robert, you know that table was Eliza's preference. She's never liked being the center of attention. Stop it, Mom. I said quietly but clearly. Stop lying about what I want. Stop pretending you know me when you've never bothered to try. Eliza, she gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. What has gotten into you? This is your sister's wedding. Exactly, I continued, maintaining my composure despite the adrenaline coursing through me. It's Katherine's wedding. A family celebration. Yet you've done everything possible to separate me from the family. That's absurd, she sputtered, looking around nervously at the nearby guests who were trying to pretend they weren't listening. I've included you in everything. You included me as a prop, I corrected her. A bridesmaid for the photos, seated far away for the actual celebration. Just like you've treated me my entire life, present but not important. My mother's face flushed. I will not stand here and be accused of whatever it is you're implying. I have always treated both my daughters equally. Margaret, my father said, stepping closer to her. That's simply not true, and you know it. Katherine has always been your priority, your focus. Eliza has been an afterthought at best. How dare you? She hissed. After everything I've done for this family? For both girls. Name one thing you've done for me in the past year. I challenged her. One event of mine you've attended. One accomplishment you've celebrated. One aspect of my life you've shown genuine interest in. Her silence was deafening. Exactly, I said softly. You can't because there's nothing. Katherine moved to stand beside me. Mom, I never realized how differently you treated us. Looking back now, it's so obvious and I'm ashamed I never spoke up. Not you too, Mom said, her voice rising with indignation. After everything I've done to make this day perfect for you. And now you're both attacking me in front of everyone. No one is attacking you, I said. We're asking you to acknowledge reality. The reality, she snapped, is that I have spent months planning this perfect wedding. The reality is that I have dedicated my life to supporting Katherine's ambitions, because she actually has ambitions worth supporting. The reality, Eliza, is that you chose to move away and pursue a career drawing pictures while your sister became someone important. There it was, the truth she had never spoken aloud before. In her eyes, I had never been worth the investment of her attention or pride. I'm a nationally recognized graphic designer, I said, my voice steady despite the hurt. My work has won awards and is featured in campaigns you see every day. But even if I weren't successful by conventional standards, I would still deserve a mother's love and respect. My father placed a hand on my shoulder. She's right, Margaret. And it stops today. No more favoritism, no more dismissing Eliza's accomplishments, no more seating her by the coat room. For a moment, my mother looked genuinely stunned, as if she couldn't comprehend this sudden united front. Then her expression shifted to wounded indignation, a look I'd seen many times when she didn't get her way. I have done nothing but try to give both my daughters the best of everything, she said, her voice trembling with perfectly calibrated emotion. If Eliza feels slighted, perhaps she should examine her own choices rather than blaming me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need a moment to compose myself after this ambush. She turned and walked away, several concerned female relatives immediately flocking to her side. Well, Katherine said after a moment of shocked silence that was illuminating. I'm sorry, I said immediately. I didn't mean to create a scene at your wedding. Don't you dare apologize. Katherine replied fiercely. I'm the one who should be sorry for not seeing this sooner. For not standing up for you all these years. James approached cautiously, having witnessed the exchange from a distance. Everything okay? He asked, his arm sliding supportively around Katherine's waist. Not really, Katherine admitted. But it will be. My sister is joining us at the head table for the rest of the night. James nodded without hesitation. Of course. I'll have them bring another chair. As we moved toward the cake table, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation hadn't magically fixed decades of damage. But speaking my truth, and being validated by Katherine and my father, had released something that had been trapped inside me for too long. Maintaining a cold dignity and speaking to me only when absolutely necessary. But for once, her disapproval didn't diminish me. When the dancing started in earnest, Jessica sought me out. You look different, she observed. Like a weight's been lifted. It has, I confirmed. I finally said what I've been holding in my entire life. And how does it feel? I considered the question as I watched my mother carefully working the room, my father keeping a watchful eye on her from the bar, and Katherine dancing joyfully with James. Terrifying. I admitted. But necessary. Jessica grinned and pulled me toward the dance floor. Then let's celebrate with some terrible dancing. And even allowed myself to be pulled into group photos. When the photographer called for a siblings picture, Katherine grabbed my hand and proudly posed with me. Our arms wrapped around each other's waists. The beautiful Marshall sisters, the photographer said, unaware of the significance of that simple acknowledgement. Later, when it was time to cut the cake, Katherine insisted I stand with her and James. Family belongs together, she said pointedly, loud enough for our mother to hear from her position nearby. It was a small victory, but in that moment it felt monumental. I was reclaiming my place in the family on my own terms, no longer willing to accept invisibility as my designated role. The morning after the wedding dawned with the surreal quality that often follows moments of profound change. I woke in my hotel room feeling emotionally raw but strangely peaceful. The truth I had carried for so long was finally in the open, acknowledged by those who mattered most. Katherine had arranged a farewell breakfast for close family and the wedding party before she and James departed for their honeymoon. I arrived to find my father and the newlyweds already seated at a table by the window overlooking the harbor. My mother was noticeably absent. Eliza. Katherine waved me over. Her face bright despite what must have been very little sleep. We saved you a seat. As I joined them, the absence of tension was palpable. No one was walking on eggshells, measuring words, or maintaining a careful facade of family harmony. Where's Mom? I asked, reaching for the coffee pot. Breakfast in her room, Dad replied. She's not feeling well. His tone made it clear this was a diplomatic excuse rather than a legitimate illness. I'm sorry about yesterday, I began, but Katherine cut me off. Stop apologizing for standing up for yourself, she said firmly. If anything, yesterday was long overdue. It was, Dad agreed, surprising me again with his directness. I've spent years trying to balance your mother's preferences without ever directly challenging them. That ends now. James, who had been quietly supportive throughout, nodded. Families are complicated, but they should always be safe places for everyone in them. I had no idea how bad it was, Katherine admitted, reaching for my hand across the table. I knew Mom was tougher on you, more focused on me, but I didn't realize how systematic it was. How she actively pushed you aside rather than just favoring me passively. It's not your fault, I assured her. She's always been careful to make her favoritism look benign, even thoughtful. Eliza prefers quiet. Eliza isn't interested in these events. Eliza would rather do her own thing. When really you were never given the choice, Dad said softly. We talked openly throughout breakfast, about childhood memories that look different in retrospect. About the ways my mother had shaped our family narrative about what healthier relationships might look like moving forward. I want us to be real sisters, Katherine said as we hugged goodbye. Not just when Mom allows it, but all the time. Call me when you get back to Chicago. I will, I promised, feeling hopeful about our relationship for the first time in years. Returning to Chicago was both a relief and a challenge. My carefully constructed independent life welcomed me back, but it now felt less like an escape and more like a choice. I threw myself into work, using my design projects as healthy outlets for processing the emotional upheaval. The first text from my mother arrived 3 days after the wedding. I hope you're satisfied with the scene you created at your sister's wedding. We'll speak when you're ready to apologize. I didn't respond. For once, I refused to engage with her attempt to rewrite reality or make me the villain in her narrative. Katherine called twice that week, our conversations stretching for hours as we rediscovered each other as adults rather than as the roles we'd been assigned in our family. She sent me pictures from her honeymoon in Greece, funny stories about James attempting to speak the language, and genuine questions about my current design projects. Dad called too, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. Your mother and I are in counseling, he shared. It's not easy, but it's necessary. I should have done this years ago, Eliza. I'm sorry I failed you. You didn't fail me, I told him. Though part of me had felt that way for years. You were caught in it too. Maybe so, but I was the parent. I should have protected you better. A month after the wedding, he surprised me by asking if he could visit Chicago. I've never seen where you live, he realized aloud. I'd like to if that's okay with you. His visit marked the first time either parent had shown interest in my life on my terms. We toured my design studio, ate at my favorite restaurants, and walked along Lake Michigan while having the honest conversations we'd never managed before. He marveled at my work, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely proud of the life I'd built. You know, he said as we watched the sunset from Navy Pier, you've always been extraordinary, Eliza. I'm sorry I didn't say that enough. 3 months after the wedding, my mother finally called. She suggested dinner during an upcoming medical conference that would bring both my parents to Chicago. I agreed with trepidation, unsure what to expect but unwilling to refuse this small overture. The dinner was tense but civil. Mom attempted to slip into old patterns several times, dismissing my recent award nomination, changing the subject when I discussed my work, making pointed comments about artistic hobbies versus real careers. But something had fundamentally shifted in our family dynamic. Actually, Mom, I said calmly when she referred to my design career as drawing. I'm the creative director for campaigns that generated over $20 million in revenue last year. It's a bit more than drawing. My father nodded approvingly. Eliza's work is exceptional. Her agency is considered one of the best in the Midwest. Mom looked startled, unused to being contradicted. Well, I suppose it's nice that you found something that suits you, she managed. Clearly uncomfortable with this new reality where her dismissals weren't accepted without challenge. The dinner wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a beginning, the first time I'd maintained boundaries without retreating or exploding. I left feeling proud of myself rather than diminished by her. Over the following months, I began therapy to address the deep-seated insecurities that years of maternal rejection had instilled. Your mother's treatment of you was about her limitations, not your worth. My therapist emphasized repeatedly until I began to truly believe it. 6 months after the wedding, Katherine came to visit me in Chicago. We spent a weekend exploring the city, taking architecture tours, eating deep dish pizza, and continuing the honest conversations that were rebuilding our relationship. Mom asked about you yesterday, she mentioned as we walked along the lakefront. Actually asked not just to set up criticism. Progress, I observed with a wry smile. Microscopic progress, Katherine agreed. But Dad's been relentless about the counseling. I think she's starting to realize what she stands to lose if she doesn't change. I wasn't holding my breath for a maternal transformation, but I was learning that I didn't need my mother's approval to value myself. The validation I'd sought from her for so long was something I could give myself. By the 1-year anniversary of Katherine's wedding, our family had reached a new equilibrium. Not perfect, not always comfortable, but more honest than before. Mom remained mom, critical, status conscious, and naturally inclined to favor Katherine, but the overt favoritism was tempered by Dad's vigilance and Katherine's awareness. Most importantly, I no longer accepted the role of family afterthought. The journey from that table by the coat racks to genuine self-acceptance wasn't linear or simple. There were still painful moments, setbacks, and days when old insecurities surfaced. But there were also new joys. Deeper connection with my sister, honest relationship with my father, and the freedom that came from no longer contorting myself to seek approval that would never come on fair terms. I learned that some mothers can't or won't love their children equally, but that their limitations don't define their children's worth. I learned that speaking truth, however uncomfortable, is ultimately less painful than living with silence. And I learned that family can be redefined, boundaries can be established, and healing can begin at any point, even from a table by the coat racks. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family or struggled with favoritism between siblings? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that your worth isn't determined by anyone else's ability to see it. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share it with them. Thank you for listening to my journey from invisibility to self-acceptance. Sometimes the hardest tables to sit at lead to the most important growth.